terrorism efforts with border protection. The Rio Grande Valley is the Trump administration's top priority for this new border wall construction. Since the late 1990s, it has become the #1 point of crossing for immigrants and those seeking asylum. And this is why he visited the Rio Grande Valley back in January, just earlier this year. I was lucky enough to be there, working on another project, as a matter of fact, and I was going to do some oral histories, and all the folks, as I was calling people to confirm that we were going to meet to do these oral histories, they said, watch out, we're going to be at the protest, man, so if you want to do the interview there, we can do it there. And I said, absolutely, I'm down. I'll see you there. If the border wall comes to South Texas, it would cost taxpayers $25 million a mile. And even though agreements were made to protect the state park, a national butterfly center, a national refuge, and La Lomita Chapel, no one believes that this president will keep his word. Keep in mind that there is a border fence in plain sight already in Brownsville. It is an imposing 18-foot high fence with rust-colored steel bars that in 2009 the Department of Homeland Security informed landowners along the northern bank of the Rio Grande that the new border fence would be cutting right through the middle of their properties. That meant that the homes of some landowners end up on the south side of the fence, essentially what is known as a no man's land. The Department of Homeland Security built most of the fence in rural areas, but the agency, and this is both sad and hilarious, had also planned to cut through a section of the University of Texas at Brownsville, leaving 165 acres of the campus on the south side of the fence. Campus administration challenged the proposal until the government revised its plan, but even so, a scaled-back version of the barrier now stood between the campus baseball fields and the golf course. The Santa Rosalia Cemetery, where my grandparents, Joaquin and Dominga, that I mentioned a little earlier, and other family members, and not just family members, World War I veterans, World War II veterans, that are buried in Santa Rosalia, this cemetery that now sits south of the border fence, surrounded by open fields and border patrol agents. If you go to pay respects to the ancestors, you will come across border patrol agents that will be watching your every move. America's urge to wall off its borders rubs against that great American myth, right? That F word, frontier. As America's expansion in the latter 19th and early 20th century is tied up in its borders, race-based quota systems and immigration controls leading to the passage of the National Origins Act of 1924, which excluded Asian immigrants and sought to secure most of its slots available to Europeans. Mexicanos and Mexicanas, of course, were exempt because of their necessary labor. But 1924 also saw the birth of the Border Patrol, another iteration of the paramilitary force of the Texas Rangers. That came to have tremendous power in the region and carried on the tradition of state-sanctioned violence. That history of violence lives on today in the lives lost, the migrants who died in Border Patrol's custody, and the cruel policies that have separated families along the border. 245 children, perhaps even more, separated just since a federal court ordered the government to halt these separations. Or the cruel moment when these Border Patrol agents mocked a room full of crying migrant children last summer after they had been separated from their parents. Here we have an orchestra, one of the Border Patrol agents joked. In the midst of these tragedies, it is the saints that have carried us. And I begin at home. I grew up a preacher's kid, which meant that, as was already mentioned, I spent a lot of time in church. Growing up, everything was literally about God. The rapture, remember that? Fear of hell, Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, and nights during the week inside of the church, singing, praying, and hearing my elders give testimonies on the triumphs and struggles of their lives. As a kid in the 1980s and 90s, if I wasn't in church or school, chances are you could find me and about 10 other guys from the neighborhood playing basketball in the hot concrete box that we call the gym that was right behind our church. Now you should know that our church was on a particularly unique street in Brownsville, Minnesota Avenue, at a Mennonite church, a Winter Texan trailer park. Those are essentially snowbirds, people from all over the north that leave this area during the winter to go hang out and stay warm in the south. And 2 houses over from the church was Joe King's print shop, the most vocal anti-immigrant voice on the block. And just down the road from that was Casa Oscar Romero, a shelter for those fleeing violence in Central America in the 1980s and seeking asylum in the US. The shelter was named, of course, after the Bishop Oscar Romero, who fought for the rights of the poor in El Salvador. It first opened in 1982 and then relocated to this part of Brownsville, to that street, to that Minnesota Avenue in the late 1980s. Anti-immigrant protesters would often show up at Casa Oscar Romero, and when they would, they were often met with the power of Sister Juliana Garcia, Catholic nun, who said, quote, "If there are any confrontations, they will only be with me." That was in the New York Times in 1986. Joe King and his group, comprised largely of Winter Texans in the 1980s, were unsuccessful in their attempts to stop the shelter from opening in 1986. So instead, they watched La Casa with video cameras and night vision equipment, reporting any violations. And by the way, I get a vision of night vision equipment, and it's 1986. I just wonder what that looked like and what the video cameras were like. Anyway, sorry. Reporting any violations in hopes of forcing La Casa volunteers and trying to push them and trying to catch them violating the law if they could. This is also before my home church made a decision to provide sanctuary for refugees, but that would change on a wet and windy Wednesday night around 1988, when church members convicted that here they were praising God in a nice and comfortable building while people struggled to cram into a shelter to stay dry. Casa Oscar Romero was busting at the seams with people. The story goes that the church people stopped worship that night, got in their cars and drove a mile down to the shelter, past the Winter Texan Park, past King's print shop, to offer people a place to stay at the church, in that gym where I played basketball. Over the next few years, anywhere between 100 to 300 people slept, ate, showered, and played basketball with me in that same gym where I believed that I was Michael Jordan. I was shorter and shorter, right? Obviously. These were women and men whose life circumstances I would not understand until later. What I did grasp as a young kid, however, was the positive impact that the church, full of borderland saints, and our building had on those who needed refuge, those that were seeking asylum. 30 years later, a little more than a mile from this church, from that gymnasium now sits that Southwest Key Detention Center, where in the summer of 2018, 1,500 or more children, ages 10 to 17, were housed inside a 250,000 square foot shell of a former Walmart superstore. In the midst of all this manufactured crisis, and in the midst of this president who summed by this hateful rhetoric, are the powerful voices of the people in our community, people whose faith in each other and in instances in their faith in God compels them to action. People like Mike Benavides, a school administrator who founded this group called Team Brownsville, a group of ordinary folks who, in partnership with other volunteers, work to help asylum seekers that are not allowed to come to the U.S. side to make their case. They have to wait on the Mexican side. 45 to 60 people at any time, from India, from Cuba, from Colombia, from Bangladesh, from El Salvador, from Honduras, forced to wait in Mexico. Team Brownsville, with the wagons that they use to carry materials across the bridge, make sure that they have what they need. They do that, and then they go to work, and they come back, and they do it again in the evening. And just last month, a group of drag queens organized a protest along the U.S.-Mexico border in Brownsville to voice their opposition to the border wall and raise money for LGBTQ asylum seekers. The leader of the group, Beatrix Lestrange, aka Joe Colon Valles, whose fashion that day included a multicolored dress, a red wig, black pumps, and a choker with studs, commented on the protest that, quote, "Ultimately, our goal is to use the beauty of drag, art, and performance against the hateful, racist, and xenophobic rhetoric that is being projected onto our communities. Drag queens from throughout the Rio Grande Valley gathered in a public park as the strain shouted, we are here to bring joy, positivity, beauty, drag culture to whatever this is," pointing to the border fence. In less than 2 hours, they raised $650. Borderland Saints. Sister Norma Pimentel, who you might have heard of, has been called the patron saint of the border. She leads the Humanitarian Respite Center in downtown McAllen. Near the bus station, she has organized a group of volunteers to take and receive immigrants, providing meals for them, a shower, a nap, help to get them to their next location. She's been called the Pope's favorite nun and the Mother Teresa of South Texas. And she is someone that is not new to this work. For over 4 decades, Pimentel has been working with migrants coming through the Rio Grande Valley. In the 1980s, she was there in Casa Oscar Romero. She formed part of that resistance that took place along Minnesota Avenue. And even though she is best known for her current work, it's her political formation that came of age in the 1970s, part of that Latina and Latino religious left that quietly took its place in the 1970s and set the groundwork for the sanctuary movement in the 1980s. She's part of a generation that saw Father Luis Olivares and Lidia Lopez welcome refugees and undocumented immigrants to La Placita Church in downtown Los Angeles. And in a context that saw the formation of Latina and Latino theology with scholars such as Ada Maria Isasi Diaz and Justo Gonzalez. I think of my home, the lower Rio Grande Valley, and what it can teach us in terms of life and resistance. Even as the region inspires cultural exchange, it also demands that we respect the struggles, the pitfalls, and the missteps that come with being part of a vibrant border community. The Borderlands community forces us, moves us to reconsider the meaning of community by reminding us that diverse communities thrive in the spaces between solidarity and estrangement. But most importantly, the Borderlands demonstrate that quintessentially American quality, optimism, does not come from naivete, but it's born from struggle. It's born from knowing our own stories. Every day in the work of Sister Norma Pimentel, in the work of Team Brownsville, and in the dragtivists that stand up for LGBTQ asylum seekers, the holy practices of welcoming the stranger, of feeding the hungry, of clothing the naked, and continuing to be a presence of love are practiced by these Borderlands saints. If displacement, if land loss is at the center of our narrative, then I'm compelled to say that it's the Borderlands saints that have shown us the way. They've always guided us, and today they continue to guide us, showing us the way home. Thank you all very much.
So we have a microphone set up here in the middle of the room and towards the back. I'm the moderator and I take my job very seriously, so I'm going to keep us on time to make sure that we finish the Q&A session on time. And I also ask you that if you're asking a question, to please keep it succinct, as we want to make sure we have as many voices as possible being able to engage with our speakers. So if you're interested in asking a question, please line up and speakers will take your questions. As we wait, I will start off with a question. We've had a very broad and diverse set of perspectives on the immigration issue. So from the Muslim to thinking about the Borderland saints to thinking local in Bloomington with Andaki Hoosier. If there is one thing you want our audience to go home with after your presentation, what would you like to stay in their mind from your presentation? One takeaway point. I think I stumped them.